Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Pettus, the medical director of Essential Provisions, and it is a great thrill and honor to welcome you to the first recording of our new podcast, The Mightiest Warriors. The Mightiest Warriors is a podcast that shines light on the remarkable stories of people who have transformed profound adversity and challenge in their lives into a force of compassion, of leadership, of service to others. These are stories, in fact, that don't come from people that you might read about in the everyday newspaper. These are everyday people who are warriors, finding ways in their challenging journeys to realize what's possible in their lives in service to self and others. Um, this is a podcast that we feel comes at an ideal time when one looks at just all of the pervasive negativity and divisiveness of headline news and 24/7 social media hubbub. And these stories, by their very nature, tend to be designed to get the click, the view, the share, and uh, people respond to divisiveness and fear mongering in ways that our media and news outlets take full advantage of as they decide how best to lock you in. And it's in that behemoth of divisiveness and negativity that we are pleased to be shining a light on stories that are more positive, more inspiring, stories that don't generate fear, but instead generate hope. Essential Provisions, the uh, company that I am medical director of, is the sponsor of the Mightiest Warrior podcast. And Essential Provisions, just very briefly, is a company dedicated to nourishing those who seek resilience, strength, well-being at every level, physically and mentally. We're a nutritional science and human performance food company that makes meals ready to eat that are complete meals in a package that are from the most clean and pristine sources on the planet. There are no new to nature molecules, chemicals, preservatives, glyphosate, mold uh, in any of our products that are rigorously tested. And we take the work out of people trying to find good sources for the food that they're eating. We also make nutritional sports blends. These are energy dense blends that have a nice combination of protein and healthy, naturally sourced fats, carbohydrates of a plant-based nature, sort of the optimal fuel as we translate this burgeoning science of nutrition and human performance in ways that can help us debunk this notion that fast, convenient food can't be good for you. So I'm pleased to be serving such a great company that was founded by Robin Gentry McGee and her husband, Brian McGee, two extraordinary human beings who have met the challenge of providing healthy, nutrient dense, and available and accessible foods to those confronting serious medical illness. And historically, Robin and Brian were able to take many of their own challenges that they have found and supporting their loved ones confronting their mortality and engaging a health system that, as many of you know, and as a physician educator of 40 plus years, I'm well aware of the fact that ours is a system that falls short in so many ways. And so Robin, as a culinary, an alchemist, as I refer to her, was able to craft and create food products that people on chronic tube feeds, people unable to eat, children and adults across the age continuum, and the families, their loved ones who cared for them, um, could have a choice for sustenance that looked nothing like what the medical establishment was offering. And so Robin was able to take that tremendous challenge and the many obstacles of bringing something that disruptive to the marketplace in a most profound and successful way. And so I'm very pleased to be part of that life force. And I will be interviewing Robin very soon as our first formal guest on the Mightiest Warriors podcast. I thought it would be um, helpful to share a little bit about my own warrior story, and I appreciate your indulgence. We will have content from people, most of whom you've never heard of, that have transformed their lives and the lives of others. We also are a science and education-based platform as a nutrition science company. And so we'll have media outlets that also dive into great detail about the science of nutrition. And that will take the form of our YouTube channel and with lots of webinars and educational content on our website and other social media outlets. But the Mightiest Warriors podcast is really more about the human story. I won't be delving too much into the science, though I love that, but we'll have other ways that you can access that. And so thank you for tuning in. As I said, I'm a physician educator. I grew up, for the most part, in Massachusetts, where I've lived for all of my 68 years, or most of those years. And I currently live in Western Massachusetts in the beautiful Berkshire Hills, Norman Rockwell country, where for the last 40 years, I have worked as a physician educator in the health system, Berkshire Health Systems, and in the communities that our health network serves. My original training is in nephrology. As I said, I grew up in Massachusetts. I went to Boston University. I was one of the first in my family to get a college education in my generation, and was pre-med. Like most, young men, you were kind of reduced to a stereotype. If you like science and you should become a doctor, right? So I began to think that way without having any idea what a career as a physician would actually be like. Nor did I have any, physician family members or clinical family members. So there was very little experience or insight that trajectory sort of started me on. And when I got my bachelor's degree from Boston University, I went on to the University of Massachusetts Chan Medical School. And from there, I went on to do 3 years of residency at Mount Auburn Hospital, a Harvard Medical School teaching hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I became board certified in internal medicine. From there, I went on to do specialty training, what's called a fellowship. And I would go on to Massachusetts General Hospital, also under the Harvard Medical School teaching programs, and did my training in nephrology, which is the study of kidney diseases, hypertension, particularly difficult to control hypertension, and complex metabolic health issues. And so I found myself on this incredible trajectory of highly specialized medical education, really I think many would say the quintessential Western medical allopathic model of care, working with amazing people, and tremendous insight and opportunity. My family growing up was very blue collar. My father had a high school education. He was born and raised in Alabama. My mother grew up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, never went to college. And so we lived week to week. And um, for me to sort of grow up in this blue collar environment where everything was precious, every meal, uh, our time together, um, having what we needed to be happy. I learned at a young age that having lots of money had little to do with how happy one could be in their lives. As my sister Nancy and I, my older sisters, my only sibling, um, just were always the recipients of great love and attention by our parents. And so it was an interesting juxtaposition for me because as I get into my formal medical training, I at times didn't feel worthy. Being around people who went to private schools and Ivy League colleges, and parents were professionals, and this sort of intergenerational legacy left me at times thinking, gee, what am I doing here, right? Those questions of confidence and worthiness, right? All these sort of illusory narratives that our minds will quickly craft and sometimes even convince us of. And so mine has been a journey that has always kept me grounded to those blue collar roots, to the recognition that serving humanity was indeed the greatest gift and the greatest opportunity that I could have ever hoped for. And I would say that for the most part, I've been living the dream for a long, long time. My parents, who um, were always right there to support every decision I made in my life, had a lot of health issues. And so I grew up in a home where my mother was chronically ill. My mother, father, and I were in a very traumatic motor vehicle accident in 1960 in rural Alabama. My mother went through the windshield. My father had several very serious injuries. And interestingly, as this little 3-year-old, unrestrained, of course, there were no seatbelts back then. I was extracted from this um, wrecked mass of steel without any injuries. I did not have one injury that was noteworthy from that. And many of the locals in Alabama, where my father grew up, thought of me as a bit of the miracle child. My mother would would have traumatic brain injury that would take many years of hospitalization and rehabilitation. She had to learn how to walk again and talk again. She was left with profound health issues, including depression, anxiety, PTSD. And this was in the 60s at a time where there was very limited understanding and insight. And so it was very much kind of a tough love culture. And so at a very young age, as a child, I it became easy for me to see the pain in my parents' faces as they confronted their lives and those challenges. It was easy for me to feel what they were feeling. And I think at a very young age, because of those very difficult challenges, I was able to cultivate empathy. As a child, I could begin to easily recognize pain in the faces of others, even when people weren't expressing how much pain they were experiencing. I could sense that it was there. And so I would come to realize, not at the time, but as I got onto my medical journey, that those extraordinarily difficult challenges for me as a young boy would allow me, became a gift that allowed me to cultivate this innate capacity to connect with others. And many years later, as I matured as a young medical student and physician, I realized that even though at times I didn't feel worthy of the sort of intellectual, academic, right, this sort of these accolades that we attach to those things, where I found my strength greatest was my ability to connect with others. And I would hear that. I would hear that from people that said, you know, when you walk into the room, Mark, I, I felt more comfortable. I appreciate the way that you listen to me. I feel listened to when I am talking with you. Whether it was a someone who did custodial work in a local school or a Nobel laureate, and I treated those and everything in between, I would come to realize that it didn't matter what your degrees were or what your title was or your professional job was. All people in the context that I was engaging them, confronting illness, sometimes confronting mortality, to me were the same. There was this universal experience of engaging people who were fearful, who were uncertain, who were traumatized, who were struggling to find perspective in the midst of these unexpected setbacks. And that laboratory of life for me became more affirming with every interaction. To feel someone else's pain, I quickly got over the fear of entering the free fall of those individuals. And many people that I've treated through the years have been in complete biopsychosocial, spiritual free fall. And my early childhood experiences gave me the opportunity to jump without fear, to enter that free fall, to experience that to the extent that I could, to relate to it to the extent that I could through my own experiences, and to understand that as humans, we're all connected. We may appear different on the surface. All these perceptions of separateness, I would come to realize were more illusory than real. Interestingly, as I would go on to do my residency and fellowship training in Boston, both my parents, would develop kidney failure. I had already made the decision to go into that profession because I, maybe more than anything, found it more challenging and difficult than any of the specialty fields that I had experienced. And again, as I look back on some of my childhood challenges, the gift that emerged from those challenges was the courage to meet a challenge head on with an experience that tended to leave me coming out the other end okay. There was this confidence that I could enter uncertainty and fearful, challenging conditions with a greater likelihood of knowing that I would land on my feet. And so as my parents began to confront kidney failure, I found myself as a kidney specialist, wearing the professional hat. And I can tell you, most of my parents' caregivers, and they had beautiful, remarkable caregivers in their lives, would rarely make a decision without my blessing. Mark, what do you think? Mark, what do you think about this or that? Um, uh, and and then I would have the hat of the son, wanting desperately to relieve the suffering that my parents were confronting, knowing enough to know that they were on a trajectory that was not going to go away or go away quickly, that this was indeed a marathon, and I would come to appreciate life as to be embraced from a longer term perspective. And so my parents would both end up on dialysis, which is a treatment for people whose kidneys are no longer working well enough to sustain their lives. And so I had to have been one of the only nephrologists in the United States, maybe one of the only on this planet, to have two parents with end-stage renal disease on dialysis, um, that being my specialty of care. And for any of you who are familiar with what it's like to experience that, or to be a caregiver for a loved one who experienced that, you could appreciate that there are very few journeys as challenging as end-stage renal disease as it relates to health and quality of life. And so every person in my professional cap that I would encounter, you know, could have been my mother, could have been my father. The caregivers could have been my sister, could have been me. Uh, the empathy that I had already cultivated through my life was taken to another level as I could, in such a personal way, relate to the experiences and the subtleties, right? These spiritual wounds, wounds that don't show up on an X-ray or in a blood test, wounds that take the form of um, who am I? What is the meaning of all of this? Is there something that I did wrong to find myself in this place that feels like punishment and suffering? What happens after I die? If, this is likely to take my life. What happens next? What happens to my family, those that I leave behind? And so these spiritual wounds were things that I began to see more clearly on the faces of others, wounds that often would never come up explicitly in conversation or in the documentation. Um, and as my parents continued on that journey, and as I supported them as a caregiver with my sister Nancy, who was angelic in her commitment to my parents, I would begin to experience more value conflicts as a Western trained physician, and began to ask the question, is it possible that there's something that I don't know, knowledge of which would change everything? Is it possible that there is something that I don't know, knowledge of which would change everything? And as I began to reflect on that question, and particularly as it related to my parents, I would come to realize that much of what they confronted, and they had diabetes, they had high blood pressure, they had heart disease, both my parents smoked. I would realize that while I was really well trained to sort of put out the fire or bring these horrible fires under control, I had very little training or insight into how to prevent the fire from beginning to begin with. And I would realize that this amazing education that I had, the knowledge and skill that I was so grateful to have acquired, would only take me so far in reconciling some of these questions. And I would go on to appreciate that there was a robust nutritional science and that food indeed was medicine, as Hippocrates reminded us of 2,500 years ago, um, and that there was probably much that I could be doing to help nourish others in a way that would mitigate these diseases from occurring. I would come to realize that the toxins in our environment, these are things that I was never really taught much about in medical school. And I'm a former associate dean of medical education at the University of Massachusetts Chan Medical School. I've retired from that role more recently, but there just wasn't much that could help these amazing students and future doctors really appreciate this world of preventive science and how to leverage that as caregivers. And so I would come to realize that there was an entirely different playbook than that which I had been taught, that ideally would complement that which I had been taught in a way where I felt I could be a more effective steward, not just of my own self-care, but that of others I serve. So I would find myself embarking on a trajectory that I would have never anticipated. I left the practice I was in, and if you're in a medical practice, as I was, it's like being in a marriage. You shock your colleagues, the family's shocked when they realize that you're looking to find another way. And so I would go on, and one of the beauties of being a physician is that there were other things I could do to at least maintain some income. Along the way, I would work in emergency rooms and urgent care clinics, and I would had to literally deconstruct most of what I had been learned and taught, and uh, re-educate myself along the lines of a more integrative, holistic approach. And I would go on to get board certified, one of the first groups of the US physicians to get board certified in integrative medicine, as it was finally recognized as a legitimate subspecialty. Go figure. And so all of these things brought me to a place of education and learning and insight that totally changed my perception of what it is to be healthy, what it is to be sick, um, that we actually have the potential within us all to cultivate health. So I moved from this disease diagnosis treatment, and I was pretty good at that, to an entirely different paradigm of committing myself to helping people realize what was truly possible. And that's preventing these things from these chronic complex diseases from happening to begin with. Along the way, my wife Leanne and I would also have a child with Down syndrome. My son Alex, who's now 32, came into the world with Down syndrome. And again, I'll never forget that day. When Alex was born, there was this sort of context of surprise. We did not have, my wife Leanne and I did not have an the amnio and that prenatal diagnostic, because it wasn't going to change. We knew that what we were going to do. We had that discussion. And so while there was some surprise about Alex coming into the world, my initial um, reaction was not shock. It was concern for his health. I knew enough to know that many kids with Down syndrome come into the world with congenital heart disease, sometimes pretty serious cardiac health concerns, and that brought me on a journey as well as a father, as a husband. I had all these sort of professional things that we would call great accomplishments. My resume, my CV looked pretty good, but none of that really prepared me for for the spouse challenges of now adapting to this change in our lives. And uh, it made it easier for me to step away from nephrology because I was on call every third night, every third weekend, and working 100 hours a week, to a place where I could continue to adapt as a professional, but also create greater balance in my life as a father, as a husband. And like so many challenges in my life, I would go back to look at my son Alex's birth as the greatest gift possibly imaginable. Um, that brought me to a place of balance in my private professional life. That brought me to a place of advocacy and education that I could have never possibly imagined. And so, as I said a little while ago, if I had to characterize my life, I would say I am living the dream. And many of the things that I see as dreams come true, uh, I could have easily, at the time that many of these challenges were emerging, cultivated a very different mindset. And as a science geek, when you look at the neuroscience of one's beliefs, one's thoughts that emerge from those beliefs, they really do affect your biology. And so, um, the having had experiences where I could create an interpretation and response that was more positive and more forward thinking, and one that would challenge me to grow and develop in ways that I've come to recognize is exactly why I'm here. I think we're all here in this challenging educational classroom known as Earth and life, to develop and grow spiritually, as humans, to become the best possible versions of ourselves that we can possibly be, and to do so, to act, in this culture of just complete lip service, to actually behave and act in a way that was aligned and consistent with those values of love and compassion and reservation of judgment, love, hope. It's always better to be motivated by hope than it is by fear. And so here I am in 2025. Uh, while I'm not practicing medicine, I'm every bit the student of medicine today as I was 40 years ago. Most of what I focus on now actually empowers people to help themselves in ways that my initial education was limited in its potential to do so. I've come to see each day as a creation, a co-creation, not something that happens to me, but something that I create and make happen. And my life feels more rich and promising today than it ever has. So I really thank you for your indulgence, and look forward to sharing future episodes of the Mightiest Warriors with you. I would also encourage you, this podcast is not a heavy sell about our Essential Provisions product, but in the service to others, I want to certainly encourage you to check out our website, essentialprovisions.com. You will find some of the most amazing um, meals ready to eat and sports nutrition blends that any heartfelt genius like Robin could possibly have created. 100% heart, 100% integrity. And that's what our company and our products and all of us who are committed to that mission are about. We'll be having more educational web content on our website, and I look forward to sharing more of that with you. So thank you so much for tuning in to this inaugural edition of the Mightiest Warrior, and I wish you well and peace and love along the way. Thank you.